Dr. Hardy comes in to check and he says, okay, in this next contraction, like I want you to like keep pushing and I'm gonna actually like feel like how you're pushing to see what's happening. And so he's feeling for her head and he just keeps like going further and further looking for her head. And he comes back to say, well, your pelvis is sitting quite literally in the middle of your birth canal. And that's why she's not coming out.
Hi, I'm Kayla Heater, follower of Jesus, wife and mother of 5 children, Christian childbirth educator and doula, and your host of the Surrendered Birth Stories podcast, where we share God-centered birth stories, evidence-based birth education, and our pursuit of surrendering our birth plans to God. Let's get started. Hey everybody, happy Monday in the middle of July. It's very hot here. Hope you are having a wonderful summer, a wonderful week, a wonderful day. I actually just got back from a wonderful trip last night. My mom is house sitting for her brother in Florida, and she invited my sister and my daughter and I to come down for a girls' trip. So we just got to spend 4 days together in Florida, just us girls, which is super special when you live with so many boys, so many brothers. So it was wonderful. We got to spend some great time together, pool time, beach time, just some hangout time. And it was so special and such an incredible privilege. And my daughter's favorite part by far, she said, was the airplane ride because although she was on one when she was a baby, she doesn't remember it. So for her, it was like her first airplane ride, and she thought it was just about the coolest thing in the world. I also just started teaching our summer birth class tonight, so that's always fun to get with a new group of expecting couples and start their journey, their educational journey as they prepare for childbirth. If you missed the sign up for that, or maybe have changed your mind or something, I don't know, on our website, we have an online version of the childbirth class that's on demand and available anytime. So if you wanted to start it right now, right this minute, you could. If you are wanting to sign up for our fall childbirth class, that's going to be taking place in October, please reach out and let me know. We already have a couple people signed up for that class, so we would love to get a few more in there. So if you're local to the Triad of North Carolina, let me know, shoot me a message, and we'll get you signed up for the fall class. Okay, exciting news. This is our 99th episode of the podcast, which is wild to even think of, but that means next week is our 100th episode of this podcast. Such an incredible milestone. I'm just like kind of pinching myself over here like, wow, how are we already at 100 episodes? That means we've almost been at this. It'll be 2 years in September. The first Labor Day weekend in September will be 2 years that we've been doing this. So that is just wild to even think of. We have 100 episodes. So I did do a Instagram story poll, I think a week or two ago. I put it out a couple times for y'all to decide what topic we were going to talk about. So the choices were birth story or a Q&A episode or 100 quick birth tips or other, if you messaged me another idea, which I did get some pretty cool ideas. So you'll have to wait and see next week who won that vote, because there was definitely a winner. And we'll be releasing that episode, the 100th episode, next week. Also, just look out on Instagram this week for some special updates about the 100th episode. So cool. So cool. But for now, let's jump in to our 99th episode. When you're told you need to be done having kids by the time you're 25, that can feel like a lot of pressure, especially when you haven't even gotten married yet. But trusting God and His plans always surpasses trusting in the world. On top of that, when your experience in pregnancy and birth doesn't go anything like you had planned, prepared for, hoped, or prayed for, it can seem like your whole world is toppling. But perspective makes a huge difference in how we interpret what plays out in pregnancy and birth. Listen to CreElle as she explains how God had a different plan than she did and how the Holy Spirit led the way. Well, welcome to another episode of Surrendered Birth Stories. I am your host, Kayla Heater, and I have CreElle with me today. And so excited to hear her story. Can you please just take a minute and introduce yourself? Tell us about you and your life and your day to day, and help us to get to know who we're talking to today.
Yeah, my name's CreElle. I'm 24 years old. I'm married. I have a 5-month-old daughter that was just born in January. That is just so adorable and cute. We love her. And we live in Washington. We have 4 dogs, which is insane with a new baby, but we are making it work. Right now, I'm currently staying at home with her until I decide that I want to work again. But when I am working, I'm a licensed professional counselor. I work with a lot of teens and young adults, and that's kind of my passion, what I love to do. But with having a baby, it was just easier for me to stay home while nursing and be with her. So I've been really enjoying my time as a stay-at-home mom.
Oh, that's beautiful. When is her birthday in January?
She was born on January 17th. We tried to
Oh.
have her on the 16th, but she wanted to make her own entrance. So
That's awesome. Well, let's hear all about her story. So, take us back to getting pregnant. What was the journey to getting pregnant like? How did y'all find out? Was this a plan, not a plan? How did it all go down?
our story kind of starts before we were even married, long before I met my husband, Nicholas. I got diagnosed with the rare autoimmune disorder, Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, and was told for a long time that if you're going to have kids, you have to do it before 25 because you have all these issues if you don't. And that just kind of set me up for a lot of negative energy around having children. And it was a conversation that Nicholas and I had early on in dating. I told him, I said, I want my own kids. I have a desire for us to have our own kids, but you have to know that this is very much could be a part of our future, that we aren't able to have our own children. And so he knew going into getting married, we kind of just held it on a loose string, and we believe that God's a God of miracles, and we just let it at that. When we got married, we knew that we wanted kids, and we are not under the impression of the societal norm that kids are a burden. We very much believe that kids are a blessing. And
Mhm.
so right when we got married, we were like, yeah, we want to have kids. We want to start trying. We want to get pregnant. We want to see what happens. And a lot of people were against that because they were like, "Oh, you're newlyweds." We started dating, got engaged, and got married within a year, and a lot of people thought that we were crazy for wanting our first child right off the bat. But we, like I said, we didn't even know that we could get pregnant, and so for us, we decided, well, like, what's the worst that happens if we try to get pregnant? We tried for a while. We had a chemical pregnancy a few months before finding out we were pregnant with our now daughter. And at that time, when I had talked to my doctor about it, they had said, just with the issues you've had in your past and your health, why don't we switch you guys up with a fertility specialist and we'll just see what happens. And so we had that scheduled for July. And because we were meeting with the fertility specialist and we were trying anyways, I went off birth control and was like, whatever, like it doesn't matter at this point. And 2 days after I went off birth control, I got pregnant. It was a surprise, but not a surprise because we were trying, not trying. So I don't want to say unplanned, but it definitely wasn't something we thought would happen, let alone so quickly. I knew that I was pregnant for a long time before I took a test and before I told my husband for a couple reasons. One, I was very nervous that it was all in my head, and I was just like, oh, there's no way I could be pregnant. There's no way that that would happen so quickly. I'm just going to let it go. Even though I was having some weird pregnancy symptoms right from the start. And we were going on vacation with my entire family in May, and we got pregnant in April. And I was like, I just do not want to deal with knowing that we're pregnant, being around everybody, and having to try to tell this lie. I'm just not a liar. if somebody asked me point blank, I'd be like, "Yep, that's me. I'm pregnant," you know. So I just decided to not take a test because ignorance is bliss, and it would have been a lot easier to just not say anything. So we go on vacation, and actually, when we went on vacation, my sister and my brother-in-law were very adamant about this hike that they wanted to go on. My family's super active. We're all in really, really good shape. And they're like, let's just go on this hike. Like, it's great. Like, we love doing physical activities. And I'm like, okay, yeah, like let's do it. Let's go on this hike. That's, super far. And we're coming back up from the hike. So you hike down to this beach in Oregon, and it's great. The hike down is all downhill, but the hike back up is all uphill, switchbacks, horrible. And I was just dying. I was dying on this hike. I was so fatigued. I was so sick. I didn't feel good. And my mom, bless her heart, stayed back with me. We were like a mile behind everybody else. And my mom was definitely suspicious that something was up because she knows that I'm in very, very good physical condition at this point. And so she was just kind of like, okay, like you got it. Like, are you having like a flare up? Is your asthma really bad? Like, and everybody was commenting, like, man, like CreElle, like she's not doing well. Like something's up. She's just not doing well. And I was like, "Oh, man, like, now my mom's gonna know, like, it's just not even gonna matter that we keep it a secret," and at this point, my husband still didn't know, and I was afraid that my mom, being suspicious, would say something, and then it would hurt his feelings because he's very ignorant, and so I was like, all right, look, when we get back from vacation, I'll take a test so that I can just confirm the pregnancy and then we'll start kind of telling everyone. And so I came home and I kind of actually forgot because I felt really good after vacation. And for those of people that have been pregnant, your first trimester is kind of like that, where you're like, am I pregnant? Am I not pregnant? Because your symptoms are so in and out of what you think that they are. And I woke up one morning and my husband Nicholas was at the gym and I was like, "Oh yeah, like I should take a pregnancy test today. Like that's just on my list of things to do." You don't really think it's positive until you see it. And so I took a pregnancy test and I dumped out all my urine after taking the one test and it just lit up like a Christmas tree. It wasn't even a fake by that point because I was almost 9 weeks pregnant.
Whoa, you waited that long?
And so I was like, "Oh, like, okay." So I called Nicholas and he's at the gym and I was like, "Oh, are you coming home soon?" And he was like, "Oh no, I have like 3 more reps to do. Like I'll be home in a little while." And I was like, "Oh, like you should come home." And he was like, "Why? Like, why are you so adamant about me coming back? You told me I could go to the gym." And in that moment, I just literally flipped my camera on my phone and he was like, "Okay, I'll be home in like 5 minutes." And I was come home. So he comes home and he's like, "Okay, well, like that's just one test. So like, where are your other tests? Let's take another one." And I was like, "Well, I have more tests, but like, I don't have to go to the bathroom at this point." Like, and I dumped all my urine. And he was like, "Well, what? Like, I don't believe just one test."
Oh.
And I was like, "Okay, well, you're gonna have to wait because I just don't have to go to the bathroom at all." And so we go to church and we're sitting in church and he's looking at me and he's like stressing out because he doesn't believe this one test. And like, I'm like, I don't know what to tell you because I still don't have to go. And when we're on our way home from church, I was like, okay, like I finally have to go to the bathroom again. Like, but we like weren't on our way home. We were like running errands. And I was like, I'm just gonna run and go to the bathroom in the store. And Nicholas was like, no, like you have to wait till we get home so you can take all these other pregnancy tests. And I was just like, oh my gosh, like you better hustle because I don't have time for this right now. And we go home and I took 4 tests and just lined them up all next to each other. And he finally was like, okay, yeah, like I guess we can cancel that fertility appointment. And I was like, yeah, like obviously we don't need it. And so we kind of just gradually started telling our friends and family. We decided we didn't want to wait after having our chemical miscarriage. We were kind of like, we'll just tell them. Like, we'll tell close friends and family because we very much are of the opinion that if we had a miscarriage at some point, then we would want the support in that.
Mhm.
And it was Mother's Day, and so we were like, "Okay, like, let's, find, like, a creative way to tell people." And we wrote in my mother-in-law and my, grandmother-in-law's cards, Mother's Day cards, we, like, crossed out mom and put, like, grandma, and crossed out grandma and put, like, great grandma. and like underlined it and stuff and like gave it to them at a Mother's Day brunch. And so his mom was like over in the corner and everybody's talking, like nobody's paying attention to her. And she just opens the card and she's like reading it and she was just like, and like looks at us and was like, "Are you serious?" And everybody's like completely oblivious to like what's going on because this is their first grandchild, their first baby, anything on my husband's side of the family. And so they were just super, super excited, and when we told my mom, she was like, "Oh, like, that's awesome." And, like, that was her whole reaction. This is, like, her 5th kid, so she was like, "Okay, like, I knew you
Cool.
guys would get pregnant eventually," so, yeah, very different reactions from both sides of our families, but that was kind of how we just gradually shared with people on the now, and then eventually, way down the line, we posted on social media, like, halfway through our pregnancy, and it was kind of whirlwind, but we eventually got to the point that we told everybody, but yeah, I knew for a while before.
Right. Sounds like you knew for a while. It's like you were already, being nauseous and fatigued before you even took a test. That's wild to me. And just so people out there know, it's so funny to me. If you get a single, I mean, it can be the cheapest, like Dollar Tree pregnancy test. And if it has even the faintest line on it, that's all. That's all you need to know. You're pregnant.
Yep.
Like, you don't need any other tests. Because people always think, oh, like, what if it's wrong? But it's only wrong the other way. It's only wrong if like it could show you that you're not pregnant, like be a negative test, but that could be wrong. Like you could still be pregnant. I always think that that's funny.
Funny, and if you try to tell a husband that that's in a little bit of shock, then he's not gonna believe the chemical
he
piece of it,
he
and he
doesn't
just
get it.
needs the visual. Yeah, he just needs the visualization in that moment, so
Man. Oh boy. Okay. So tell us how you went about seeking care for your pregnancy. What kind of provider did you go to? What kind of birth were you thinking about having? Like, what were your thoughts and plans going into all of that?
man, finding my OB. Everybody says hindsight is 2020, and I'm a very big believer in the Holy Spirit. The Holy Spirit was very much guiding where we had our baby. I very much, for the longest time, I've always wanted to have kids. I've always wanted the experience pregnancy and experience birth in its raw form and have a natural pregnancy and do everything that I could do to not have any medication and have no intervention and all the things. And so the first thing in my head was, oh, I want to find a midwife because I'm not really interested in having an OB. But unfortunately, with my Ehlers-Danlos, a midwife would not take me for a first pregnancy because it was high risk. And so right off the bat, it was like, "Oh, okay, cool. So I don't get a birthing center. I don't get to have a midwife. Like I have to have an actual OB that I'm not interested in." But luckily, my mother-in-law, she has 6 kids. The last 4 have been C-sections, and so she's gone through many, many doctors in this area. And the OB who delivered her last 2 is still practicing. And she said, "I know you don't want to see an OB, but he's a great guy. He's like LDS, he's religious, like he'll really respect your wishes on everything you want. Just because he's a OB doesn't mean he's not gonna just see through what you want for your birth plan." And I was like, okay, well, since I have to have a doctor, then I have no other recommendations, so I'm just gonna go with him. And when I first met him, I could just tell he was a very, very calm provider. Just answered questions as we had questions. Nothing phased him. He was not stressed out about my autoimmune disorders, all was not stressed out about what I wanted for my birth and what I wanted for my pregnancy as far as intervention. And he just was the best possible scenario for how my labor and delivery ended up going later, which is why it was such a Holy Spirit thing that I saw him in the first place. Because if I would have had a midwife, and we'll get to this later in my story, but if I would have had a midwife and been in a birthing center, I would not be sitting here today because of the way that my birth went. And so God was very much directing my path of, look, you want this, but I know how this is going to go. And so I started seeing him, and he was great because I had one of the hardest pregnancies ever. I was very, very, very sick early on and was just like, man, like, I'm just miserable. Like, I just am miserable. I just cannot get over this hump of feeling so awful. And I was talking to my sister on the phone one day. I was about almost 3 months pregnant. And I said, yeah, man, like the frequent urination and all these things with the pregnancy symptoms are just so annoying. And she was like, girl, that's not really pregnancy symptoms. Like you have a UTI. And I had never had a UTI in my life, and I was like, "Oh, like, is that a bad thing?" Like, because I just had never had one, didn't know what to look for, and she's like, "Oh, yeah, like, you need to see somebody for that now." So I actually went in to the doctor, they gave me antibiotics, and, I had already had it for 3 months by that point, and so it was a really late term UTI, and they gave me antibiotics, and I just kept feeling worse. I was so nauseous, I couldn't keep anything down, I was very rapidly losing weight, not having a good time, and was already in my 2nd trimester, just like, "Okay, I feel like we should kind of be, like, moving through this by now. Everybody says your 2nd trimester is your best, and I feel the absolute worst I felt in my life." And I go back to the doctor a month later. I still have the UTI. I still have the infection. I get put on higher antibiotics, which is already ruining this idea of a natural pregnancy and no intervention because I'm stressing out about how is this affecting my baby? How's this affecting my immune system and her immune system and all the things? And so I went back on antibiotics, they doubled the dose. I go back in and it spread to my kidneys. And so I ended up with a double kidney infection in my 2nd trimester. And there was no way to treat it except oral antibiotics because there's no IV antibiotics that are safe for pregnancy that's that far along. And so my OB was just kind of like, okay, like we have to really like attack this hard. And the antibiotics were making me so sick on top of the pregnancy. And I ended up being horribly, horribly nauseous through 36 weeks pregnant. And even after that, I was still throwing up like 2, 3 times a day. My entire pregnancy, I only gained 8 pounds. So if that puts anything into
Oh.
perspective, it was
Did they ever diagnose you with, like, hyperemesis gravidarum?
no, but I think my OB definitely thought that that's what it was, and hindsight's always 20/20. I probably should have done, like, Zofran or done something to try to curb at least the nausea, but I just was taking so many antibiotics, everything was such a whirlwind, and I was already putting so much into my body that I didn't want to be taking that I
Anything
just,
else?
like,
Yeah.
"I can tough it out, like, 1 more day, tomorrow I'll feel better, tomorrow I'll feel better," and that just went on for months because I just didn't wanna take anything,
Mm.
and, yeah, with my next pregnancy, I just know, no matter how sick I am, there's no way that it's gonna be the level that it was for that, so, yeah, it was long. It was a long pregnancy. Pregnancy is long anyways, but that made it long.
Oh, yeah, when you don't feel well, it definitely makes it drag. Mm. So, pregnancy was rough. You were sick. You got a UTI that led to kidney infections. Did the antibiotics eventually, like, get rid of everything? Did it eventually get better?
Yes, my infection went away when I was 6 months pregnant, so for the first 6 months of my pregnancy, I had a bacterial infection. And then the last 3 months, I was pretty much just recovering from being so sick for the first over half of my pregnancy. So,
Mm. So, you're planning this natural birth, I assume at a hospital with the OB that was recommended to you. How does the end of the pregnancy go, and like how does labor begin?
yeah, so with my autoimmune disorder, my OB told me early on that he'd never had a patient with it go past 38 weeks. And so our
With
plan.
that specific disorder?
Yes, because the amount of relaxin that you release in the last 2 weeks of being pregnant is just an astronomical number for your joints. And if you already have this hyperextension, then you're apt to have dislocation during birth. You're apt to have other different complications or things that just lead to a way harder recovery time. And so my entire pregnancy, I'm like, all right, 2 weeks early, 2 weeks early. That's what we're thinking.
As in, like, all those women naturally went into labor spontaneously at 38 weeks?
They got induced.
Oh, he
Yeah,
induced them all at 38 weeks.
yes. And so I'm thinking,
As
okay,
a like, as a precaution?
yeah, mostly as a precaution because of the amount of relaxin. And so I was mentally preparing at that point for at least an induction and was not wanting an induction, but was slowly letting go of this idea of everything being natural and unmedicated because it was like, okay, what's the safest outcome for my child and the safest outcome for me. Okay, like this is what I feel like is supposed to happen. And so I am mentally preparing for that from like the last, 4 months of my pregnancy. Okay, I'll let go of this little piece of my plan if I have to get induced, and then people have gone like just fine with inductions. They still have a lot of their birth plan. Like we'll just follow through with that. We'll take away one piece of what we think is going to happen. And we get to my 38-week appointment, and my OB said, you actually are doing really good. So if you feel like it, like, let's just wait and see what happens. And I was like, okay, great. Like, I would love to wait and see what happens. I would love to not be induced. I would love to just go ahead with the plan. So at that point at 38 weeks, it was like, okay, like I got a little bit of autonomy back. I felt like I was going back into what I was going to do, and I was feeling really good. And then I went to my 40-week appointment, and they did a cervical exam, and I was 0% effaced and 0 centimeters dilated. There was absolutely nothing happening. Baby had not dropped, nothing was going on. And by this point, my OB was like, okay, I didn't really want to let you go to 40 weeks. And now we're pushing 41 at that point, and he was like, I'm starting to get nervous. And he's a very, very good provider, and he's been doing it for 30 plus years. And so when he says that, I'm thinking this, he does not give his opinion unless you ask for it. So if he does give his opinion, you know that it's valid and it's not just him pushing for something. And he was like, okay, so what do you want to do? Like, what do you think is the best course? And I said, well, I don't know. Like, I am not an OB. I'm not familiar with pregnancy and Ehlers-Danlos in the way that you are familiar with it, which is why I chose you as a provider. So what would you recommend? And he said, if the baby had dropped and you were 0% effaced and 0 centimeters dilated, I would say let's wait and do extended monitoring until 42 weeks. And then at that point, we'll make a decision. But because she hasn't dropped and you're making no progression, I really don't think that you're going to make progression in the next week. Even if you go into natural labor, you probably will still need Cytotec. And I was like, okay, well, Cytotec, not the worst thing, not Pitocin. Like we can just do the oral medication to try to help dilation and help things move along if it comes to that. So we scheduled an induction for a week out from then and decided, okay, like if we make it to then we will make it to then. That's just God's plan. Like at this point, she's got to come out, like because she's just comfortable.
So was the induction scheduled like around 42 weeks then, since you're almost 41?
41.6, yeah.
Okay, 41 and
So
6. Okay.
So the day of the induction rolls around, and because our pregnancy was considered high risk, we were pretty far up the list to being induced. And they call us the night of the induction, and they say, "Yeah, like we have room for you, but we don't have enough staff." And I said, and I still hadn't gone to labor at this point. And I said, "Okay, well, do you know why we're being induced? Like, have you looked at my medical history? Have you looked at why we're being induced? Have you talked to my OB provider about this?" And they were like, well, like, it just doesn't matter. We just don't have the staff for you. And they were super rude on the phone. And it was like 15 minutes before we were leaving the house to go to the hospital. And at this point, I'm thinking, okay, am I going to be okay at this point? Is my baby going to be okay if nothing's happening? And so we are just about to go to bed, and the hospital calls us back, and I can hear the doctor in the background. And obviously, somebody had looked at our chart because they're sitting there, they're high risk, they have to come in, they're high risk. And she's like, yeah, so actually, like, we had space open up for you. So if you want to come in at midnight, like, we'll make it work. And I was like, oh, okay. Yeah, sure. We can come in because we planned on having a baby today anyways. So, yeah, we'll be over in 30 minutes. And so we go to the hospital and we check in, and they get us all hooked up to the fetal monitor. And the nurse just kind of looks at me and she's like, do you feel that? And I said, no. And she's like, you are in labor. Like your contractions are 3.5, 40, like 4 minutes apart. Like, are you not feeling anything? Like, do you not know that you're in labor? And at that point, I felt dumb because everybody had told me, oh, you'll know when you go into labor. You just know. Like, you know when you're having contractions, you know it. And the only thing I had said that day, because my mom had come up since we were being induced, I told my mom, I said, man, now that the baby's bigger, like, it's just so uncomfortable when she moves around. Like, that was the only thing that I had said all day, but I was having contractions, and I had no idea that I was having contractions until I went to the hospital. So we would have ended up in the hospital within, like, hours anyways, which is ironic, and so
Did they check your dilation when you got there?
yes, so that's what I was gonna say, they did another cervical exam, and I was still 0 centimeters dilated and 0% effaced, even though I was having contractions consistently. And they were like, "You're just not dilating. Like nothing's happening. Like you've been having contractions very consistently. They were getting closer together, and there just was nothing going on with my body." And I was like, "Okay, well, we're here anyways. We would have been here anyways. And even if we wouldn't have scheduled the induction, I still would have had to have medication going to the hospital if I waited to go into labor because I just was not dilating. Nothing was happening."
Because she was
And
so high up?
she was so high up, yeah. So they were like, "Okay, we'll do side attack and then we'll see what's going on and we'll probably end up having to do Pitocin, so you just have to be prepared for that." And I'm just like, okay, like I had prepared for this once before, so I can cope with it. It's okay. I'll move on. It's fine. Like I'll just mentally prepare to go through Pitocin contractions. And I mean, I did everything to prepare for labor that somebody can do. I read all the books, I did physical therapy, I did all the food and all the things and all the stretching and all the mental preparation. And it was just very, very defeated in that moment because I felt so prepared and my body just was not doing what I needed it to do, and it was devastating, and I was trying to cope with this new idea of what labor would look like, but I also was so stressed about just getting her out at that point because we were so far along in the pregnancy, almost 4 weeks further than we thought we were gonna get in the pregnancy, and so I'd been stressed by that point for a month, and I was just like, "Okay, I just need to calm down, like, we can move through this, it's fine," and so they gave me side tech when I got to the hospital at 1 a.m. And then I waited all night for stuff to happen. They said, "Oh, get some sleep." And of course, I did not get any sleep because I was, you just don't sleep when you're in labor at all. And by the morning, my contractions just really had not picked up. They hadn't really changed from when we got to the hospital at all. And I knew before they even came into the room that they were going to tell me that they had to do Pitocin. And so I was just mentally preparing for that, even though I didn't want it. I just was like, okay, like God's plan, like God's plan, not my own. I just have to surrender to him because this is not my own life. Like even when we think it is, we don't control the course of what we live. And I've always believed that. And so why wouldn't I believe that in this moment where I truly, truly need to rely on God? And so when the nurse came in and told me that I needed Pitocin, I was a little bit disappointed, but still very optimistic of okay, like we'll do the Pitocin and then we'll actually start labor and we'll very much start to make some progress and do some things, and then I'll start to feel better that she's on her way and that we're doing well.
Could you still not feel the contractions at this point?
Not really, no. Once I knew what they were, I knew that I was having contractions, but it mostly felt like very, very mild cramps, and it wasn't anything I couldn't cope with.
Yeah.
And I think if I was at home at this point, I still wouldn't have been going to the hospital because I would have been like, this is very tolerable. Like it was
Hmm.
not active labor and I was just hanging out. I was like
Yeah.
talking through everything and I remember being bored because I was like, okay, nobody talks about how much you just kinda, like, sit here when you're, like, waiting for your baby to come. Like, you're
Hmm.
d not "Oh, your water breaks and you rush to the hospital and then your baby comes." It's like, "Oh, like, you're sitting there talking to your spouse or talking to the people in the room and just, like, everybody's texting you, like, wanting to know if the baby's here, and you're awkwardly on your phone while you're in labor because you don't have anything else to do." And that was kind of what I was doing in that moment before they did the Pitocin because I was like, "Wow, this is very anticlimactic. This is not at all what I thought would happen." And so they came in and they were like, "Okay, we're gonna start the Pitocin and everything's gonna kind of start going like hard and fast. Like you just have to know that because Pitocin obviously makes you have very, very intense contractions. And I had known that because I had done all the research on inductions because I decided, okay, I don't get a natural birth, so I'm going to do all the research I can in inductions. Again, mental preparation over and over and over again. And so they came in and they started the Pitocin drip at 9, and by about 11, I was like, okay, like now things are picking
Now I
up.
feel it. Yeah.
I feel like I'm in labor. Like now I actually feel like I'm having a baby and it's a little bit more real to me. I'm getting more excited. I'm getting more optimistic and I'm feeling like, yeah, like I can do it. Like we can do it. I was walking around with my IV pole up and down the hallway and like keeping myself moving. I had, like my own birthing gown and all the things and was like, okay, like I can still have like the version of my birth that I pictured, even with this, like all it is that this pole is just an extension of my body. Like that's all it is. I just have to pretend that this IV is just an extension of what I'm doing in this moment. And um, so yeah, I started to have really, really active contractions. I was feeling really good about it. I was sitting on my ball. I was walking the hallways. I was breathing through everything. At 2 p.m., they came in and I was like, yeah, I'm making so much progress. Like, this is great. And my provider comes in and does the check and he's like, yeah, you're like 1.5 centimeters dilated. And I was like, no, like, are you kidding me? Like, it just is taking, like, why is my body going so slow? Like, at this point, the Pitocin should be kicking in. Like, what's happening?
Well, you made
And
progress. You weren't zero
I,
anymore.
I did make progress, and it wasn't a zero. So that was something. I was like, okay, like, she's finally moving. Like, she's descending, and she knows she's got to come out. Whether she wants to or not, she has to come out. And so he was able to break my water, which was nice because a lot of times he said, I usually try to do it at like 3 centimeters, but like we got to get this going. Like you're already at the 12-hour mark. Like we got to keep rolling on this. And so I was like, okay, like let's do it. Let's break water. Let's go for it. And after he broke my water, I was like, okay, like this is getting more intense. This is getting more intense, and it just kept picking up. And I remember looking at the clock and being so surprised how fast the time was going when I didn't feel like I was doing anything. I was like, man, all I'm doing is breathing like every 2 minutes, and somehow like 2 hours has gone by. And I don't know
Hmm.
how it went by so fast. Labor seemed like it went by super, super, super fast. And now it seems like a fever dream. But so it was just I started having more and more intense contractions, and by 7 p.m., I was 7.5 centimeters dilated, and so I had
Wow.
made a lot of progress
That is
in
a lot of
5 hours.
progress.
They were like, "Oh, yeah, like, you're making good progress, but, it still could be a while to get to that point." And I kinda thought to myself, by this point, I had been in labor for almost 24 hours, and I was just like, "Ugh, I really did not want an epidural. I did not want to do the epidural. I wanted to do natural very bad." But man, those Pitocin contractions, what they tell you about them, like I obviously have not had an epidural at this point, but that was like I have a very high pain tolerance, and that was cream of the crop because by that point they had gone from 1 milligram of Pitocin to 20. And so I was like on a heavy drip at that point trying to get her out. And so I was like, you know what? I know that even if I get an epidural, like that's not me giving up. That's me knowing that at this point, if I keep going like this for several hours and then have to push, I don't think I'm going to have the energy at, 1, 2 a.m. to push this baby out because I've been awake for days and I've been going through all this medication that makes you super, super fatigued. And so, again, don't believe in hindsight, but I very much believe in Holy Spirit intervention. There was something very much pushing me to get the epidural in just my heart of hearts. And I was like, okay, like for some reason, I was really at peace with it, which I figured out why later. But at the moment, I was really at peace with getting an epidural, even though I was so adamantly against it. And so they came and they set up the epidural, they put my epidural in, and I could still walk, I could still feel everything. And
Wait, you
it
could still walk with an epidural?
my epidural. So I
They
knew that it
didn't make you stay in the bed and put a fall risk band on your arm?
I stayed in the bed only because I got the worst restless legs I've ever had in my life. I have restless legs normally, but not like this. My legs were shaking so badly. I was just laying in the bed shaking. And it wasn't birthquakes, it was just my legs. It was awful. And so I knew that the epidural had failed. And I was like, "Oh, great." So like all of this surrendering to the epidural and it's not even going to do what I want it to do in this moment, which is make it to where I don't feel exactly what I'm feeling. So then I was just coping with contractions and restless legs. And maybe the restless legs made me not think about my contractions because that time went really fast in between that dilation. But it was that was honestly the worst part of my labor was the muscle fatigue from having the shakes so bad. And by 9 p.m., I was like, man, like, I feel like I need to push. And they were like, oh, no way. Like, there's no way you're already 10 centimeters. Like, you were just at 7.5. Like, we just did all these things. And I was like, "Look, I'm not telling you, like, that I feel like I need to push. I'm telling you that, like, I'm going to push. Like, I can't help it at this point. Like, you need to figure like, somebody needs to come in and check, like, where I'm at." And so my OB was there that day, which was such a blessing, and which is why they wanted me to come in the following day because they knew he was there that day. And he was there until midnight. So I'm thinking, all right, like we got a good amount of time to get this baby out. You know, that's when he's off call. I won't feel bad if he's like not leaving late. And so he comes in and they're like, yeah, like you are 10 centimeters. So, and like whenever you feel like you need to push, like you can start pushing. And this was around right around like 10 p.m. And so I was like, great, like finally, like we're finally getting through it. And I had just kind of given up like all this thought of all the things that I wanted to do for my birth at this point because I was just like, one, make these restless legs stop. So maybe pushing will help with that. And two, I just wanted to get her out safe because it had been just such a long time getting here. And so I started pushing and I kept pushing and I kept pushing and I kept pushing and nothing was happening. I did not feel like she was moving after I got to a certain point. So I had pushed for it was about 2 hours and she still had not come out. And I was like, man, I feel like she's right there. But for the first 2 hours I was pushing, I felt like I could physically feel her moving down and was like, wow, I'm making a ton of progress. Like, I could feel everything inside like tearing and making way for this baby to come out. And then at one point, it just stopped. It was like I could feel myself pushing and I could feel nothing happening. And I just knew that something was wrong because she should have popped out by that point. And the nurse was like, "Well, do you want me to check? Like, what do you want me to do?" And I said, "Go get my OB. Like, go find Dr. Hardy because I know that something is not right with this." And my mom was in there when I was delivering and my husband, and my mom was just stressed because she was like, I can tell that you're like truly pushing. Because a lot of first time moms, you know, it takes them a while to push out their first baby because they don't know how to push correctly and it just like takes a long time. But like I said, I had done pelvic floor therapy from 16 weeks on. And so I felt like I was doing good. Like I felt like I was very much targeting the muscles that I needed to target. And Dr. Hardy comes in to check and he says, okay, you know, on this next contraction, like I want you to like keep pushing and I'm gonna actually like feel like how you're pushing to see what's happening. And so he's feeling for her head and he just keeps like going further and further, looking for her head, and he's like, okay, yeah, like try to push again. And he was like, try to push again. And we did that for like a half an hour while he was like trying to like manually manipulate her head. And he comes back to say, well, your pelvis is sitting quite literally in the middle of your birth canal. And that's why she's not coming out. Like there's an actual bone that's blocking her head from coming all the way out. So she was like right there, like ready to be born, but she could not get past my pelvis. And so what he was doing was he was trying to manually manipulate her head to go past, and he was like, I just can't. Like I don't think that she's going to come out with you pushing. And like I said, he is not a push a C-section OB at all. He's very much like, if you've had a C-section, let's do a VBAC. If you want to do natural, let's go for it. Like he does not suggest these things. And at this point, it was like almost 2 a.m. And he had stayed well past when he was supposed to be there because he was just, you know, really hoping to get this baby out. And in that moment, when he said that, I looked at my mom and she was just white. She was so stressed because my mom actually lost her first child to the exact same issue that I was having in labor and delivery. And he had lost oxygen to his brain, and by the time he came out, he was brain dead. And they took him off life support at 3 days old, and it was very, very, very traumatizing for my mom. And so, knowing that that was something that had happened to my mom when she was in labor, I told Dr. Hardy, I said, well, here's my mom's experience with having kids and what's happened. Like, do you think that there's a genetic anatomy component to this, like right now? And he kind of just like went really wide-eyed, and he sat down on the bed and he put his hand on my leg and he's like, I'm not trying to stress you out. Like you need to make the best decision for yourself. If you want to keep pushing, I'll support you pushing to the 3 hour mark, but I really think we need to get this baby out right now. And so he came in and said that to me, and I was like, "You know what? Like, okay, like if you feel like we need to get her out, then we need to get her out." And I didn't want to get to the point that it was like more emergent than it already was, because it was about to become emergent really fast. And they were like, "All right, like you need to take off all your jewelry, you need to do all these things." Like they're trying to prepare me to go into this emergency C-section. And I was like, "All right, God, like it's in your hands. It's in your hands. Like we're just gonna let it go." Like because obviously I have had no control over my pregnancy, over going into labor, over delivery, nothing. And so I was like, "All right, like let's just do the C-section. Like we'll deal with the ramifications later and we'll figure out what it is." And so they take me into the C-section at 2 a.m. and within 5 minutes, they literally Calvary just popped out, like, they just pulled her out. I was shocked at how fast it was that she came out, and I was like, "Man, that's great." And when he pulled her out, he held her up, and there was 2 things that he said. First, he said, "Oh, you don't have a big head. You don't even have a big head." And I think he was expecting her to because she was so stuck. And then he goes, "Oh, look at this." And he turns her, and she has a line bruise in the middle of her head from where she had hit my pelvic bone over and over and over again while I was pushing. So she had a hematoma on her head right when she came out. And so it was like looking at her on the outside, I could tell, oh yeah, like there's no way that she was going to come out. Like I could have pushed and pushed and pushed and she wouldn't have come out. And so even with that, when we were going into the C-section, I had told them when they were wheeling me in, they were like, "What do you still want to do? Like we can still incorporate things into, like what do you want?" And I said, "I still want to do delayed cord clamping. Like I would love skin to skin. These things, like these are still things that I really want." And they're like, "Okay, like we'll try to make that happen." And the nurses were so nice. Best labor and delivery team ever. And a lot of them had stayed after when they were supposed to get off because of the nature of timing with shift changes. And so they come into the operating room, and pretty much right when they pulled her out, Dr. Hardy held her up and he was like holding her. And he looks down and he goes, "Somebody needs to take this baby right now," and just like cut the cord. And she went away. And I was like, that was kind of the last thing I heard before he was like, "I need you to give me that right now." And he's a very, very calm guy. And so I was like, okay, something's up. Like something's wrong. I don't know what's wrong. And that was like my last thought process before my eyes just started rolling and I just started like going in and out of consciousness and was just like, okay, I don't really know what's happening right now. I guess we'll find out. I pretty much heard her cry, was really excited, and then just was like, nope, like I'm gone. And I had started hemorrhaging really bad as soon as they pulled her out. And so they didn't delay cord clamp because in that moment they just had to stop the bleeding, and I just let that go because I was like, okay, like you have to do what you have to do. This is a case of an emergency. And when I had wanted my epidural and talked about it, I said, no controlled substances. I didn't want any controlled substances in my epidural. I didn't want any fentanyl, nothing like that. And so when I'm in my C-section and I'm hemorrhaging, the anesthesiologist is telling me, "Okay, I really think you need morphine. I really think you need fentanyl. Like, I wouldn't be asking you this. I know this is your wishes, but like, we got to stop the bleeding." Like, that was all I heard. And I was just going, like to my husband because Nicholas was back there with the baby and they're asking me all these questions about things that I want. And I'm like, I am not coherent, not even thinking about anything. And I was just going, like, you got to ask him. Like, you got to ask him because I am out of it. Like, nothing's happening for me right now. And so they pushed all these meds and I just immediately started throwing up because the amount of medication that they were flushing my body with to try and stop the hemorrhaging just made me super nauseous. And Nicholas actually, there's a picture in the OR of my husband holding the baby and me on the operating table. And I'm turned to the side and you can just see the puke bag right next to me because I was just throwing up as they're trying to push all this medication. And it was just so fast. Everything was happening so fast that I just couldn't even make a decision for myself. And looking back at that picture, it's kind of crazy because I was so white and you could just tell that I just did not look good. And so I didn't have her on skin to skin. I didn't even hold her in the OR because so much was happening. And Nicholas was like, "Oh, like look at her, like isn't she cute?" Like all these things trying to show her to me, and I was just like, I don't even really remember seeing her within the first hour of her life because I just was not with it. And they were able to stop the hemorrhage and they sewed me up and they wheeled me back to the room and I was sitting in the room after all the chaos. It was like 3:30 a.m. And by this point, Nicholas was sleeping because it had just been a really long day and he has a herniated disc in his back, and he had been helping me through labor in all these positions. And I felt bad because his back hurt so bad. And I was like, "You just need to sleep. Like, I'm not going to take it personal. I'm not going to sleep because I just had this whole experience. I just need some time. Like, I just need to come down from what just happened to me." And my mom was there, and she was holding Calvary. And the nurse came in, and I hadn't even held her at that point. And it was almost 4 in the morning. She'd almost been alive for 2 hours, and I hadn't even held her. And the nurse was like, "Okay, I know you're having a really rough time, but like the one thing that you could still do is like feed her. Like she's really hungry. Like, do you want to feed her? If you don't, like that's okay. We could like figure it out." And I was like, "No, no, like I want to feed her. Like I don't want to do formula. Like if anything, I want to nurse. Like that's like, and I haven't even held her at this point, but I was so fatigued from the shakes. My muscles were so weak. I like literally couldn't even hold her. And the nurse and my mom literally just held her like against me while she nursed. And I just sat there like a blob because I was just like, I just could not come out of it. And my mom, bless her heart, she stayed like the whole morning and she just held her and she changed her for me and did all the things until Nicholas woke up. And they came in the morning, the nurses did, and they rechecked my blood and they were like, "Man, you are on the exact border of needing a blood transfusion. But let's just see if, we get some food into you because you haven't eaten in like 2 days. And if we get some juice into you and some things, if we can't start getting that back up so that we don't have to do a transfusion because we don't want to have to do that for you." And so I had some blueberry pancakes. That was the first thing that I had after labor. And man, they tasted so good because I had had so much happen in the last 2 days. And my mother-in-law called and was like, "Oh, like, we're gonna come to the hospital. Like, you can have anything you want in the world. Like, what do you want? Like, what do you want to eat? Like, anything." And I said, "I just want a coffee. That's all I want. I just want a coffee. Like, I need caffeine. I need something that like pulls me out of this like fever dream because I don't even know what's going on at this point." And my mom had to actually leave because my dad was having surgery that day. And so she had been up for 24 hours. They lived 3 hours away from us, drove 3 hours back to my dad's surgery, and was like relying on me to text her about how my labs were and how all these things were going. And so I felt so bad for her because I know that she was super stressed out through the whole experience and then had to leave after all this had happened and then go to another thing and be stressed out for somebody else. And so she left and Nicholas was sleeping and it's just like me and the baby. And I was like, like everything's okay. And we made it through it. And we're going to just move on and know that, even if it wasn't my own plan, most of life isn't. And I kind of just decided in that moment, You can either look at this as a really negative experience of, okay, I got nothing that I wanted. Like nothing went the way that I wanted. And most women in that instance would decide that they had a negative birth experience because they didn't get their plan, they didn't get what they wanted. But I decided in that moment, I was like, you know what? This is just another part of my testimony and another way that God is showing me that He shows up again and again and again. And Satan is not going to take this away from me. He's not going to take away the fact that we had our absolute miracle baby that we didn't even know that we could have in the first place. He's not going to take away this idea of us having a large family. He's not going to take away this dream of our own kids and a labor that's so beautiful and redemptive. He's not going to take that away from me because he doesn't deserve it. He doesn't deserve my time. He doesn't deserve my thought. Like nothing. The only thing is that all the praise and glory goes to God because ultimately at the end of the day, she was safe and she was healthy and everything was fine in the quiet hospital room of the morning when everybody else was calm. I just felt such an overwhelming peace. And I think that word peace is what I would use to describe just my entire labor, because even when I was going into my C-section and everybody else around me was hurrying and rushing and busy, I was just laying there thinking, okay, God. And when I was sitting on the operating table, I was cracking jokes to the anesthesiologist, and he was like, man, you are very calm for like what you're going through right now. And I was like, well, like God's plan. And Dr. Hardy kind of chuckled because, he's religious and he was like, man, this girl, like, he's stressing out trying to do this. And she latched right away and she was such a good baby. And the next morning, I thought I wouldn't even see Dr. Hardy because he was supposed to get off at midnight. And I thought, oh, surely he's gone. Like he's gone to see his family. And he had actually gone to sleep after my C-section. And he came in at like 10 a.m. And he was like, man, I just woke up. Like I just woke up and I am tired. Like last night made me tired. How are you doing? Just like so calm. And he was like, man, like look at her. And you could tell that he just had like this relief. And he was like, isn't it just amazing the experience of God through birth? And I was like, yeah, it's pretty dang amazing. And I'm very thankful that I got to experience it, even if it wasn't what I thought it was going to be. So,
That's beautiful. Well, I have a couple questions for you. But before we get to those, you've had 5 months to process all of this, and your perspective is absolutely beautiful. Um, do you have any advice for other moms out there preparing for their upcoming births, especially maybe their first births, going into
mm,
it? What would you tell them?
I think that the biggest thing I would tell them is that you can have birth suggestions or things that maybe you want, but don't die on that hill. Very practiced prayer for how you want to get yourself through your labor. Scripture that you have laid on your heart. I had a lot of women share scripture with me before I went into labor. And when I was in all the really stressful moments, it was that very much flooded my brain instead of the negative thoughts. There was just no space for any type of negativity in that. And so I would just say, rely on God and let Him lead you in how you're supposed to carry a baby into this world because it's not up to you. And you can do all the things. You can eat all the food. You can go to all the appointments and do the curb walking and do all the things. But at the end of the day, it's not your story. It's God's story through you. And we're called to be the hands and feet of Jesus. And that can be through birth and that's okay. And also, even if you have a birth experience like mine that is so radically different than what you ever planned, it's okay that you struggle coping with what happened in your birth, even if you're a Christian. And I think it's kind of still this idea of Christians can't have mental health issues or have things that hurt because they just need to pray more or rely on God. And that's not true. like you can have a hard time coping with your birth while still accepting that it's God's plan. It took me a long time to get to the point of being okay with where I'm at and also knowing now I don't qualify for a VBAC. And so even that is something that I've had to cope with long term because now I have to have C-sections and it's no longer how many kids can my husband and I have, it's how many C-sections can my body tolerate to bring babies into this world. And so just coping with things that you thought weren't how they were supposed to go, it's okay if that takes you time. And you might never come to terms with what actually happened in your labor and delivery, and it might not be what you thought it was, and that's okay. You just learn how to incorporate that into your life and cope with it without moving on from it because it's powerful. No matter how your baby's born, it's a powerful story to tell.
Which is exactly why we do this podcast.
And I thought, whatever, they just say that. They just say those things and like, I'm just gonna do it anyways. And then when I was pregnant, I was like, okay, okay. Like, they might know what they're talking about, like a little bit. And then when I started breastfeeding, I was like, I am withering away. Like, I had to start taking like a double dose calcium supplement and all the things because I just cannot keep up with
Like
giving
all the
away calcium.
nutrition loss. Yeah.
Mhm.
Wow.
So yeah, it just I think breastfeeding has been just as hard as being pregnant because you still have a little bit of relaxin when you're breastfeeding. I still can't take meloxicam while breastfeeding either.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
yeah,
Wow.
but I'm just not going to go back on it until I'm done having kids. I just decided I'm going to cope with it because if I go on it, I'll get used to it and then I'll have to go off and I'll think it's
And then it'll
worse
be
than if I
harder.
just
Yeah.
I was on it. Yeah,
Yeah.
so.
Mm. Mm. Well, thank you. Thank you for sharing everything. Thanks for being so open and willing. I really appreciate you coming on. This has been great.
Yeah, I hope that it can shed some light on the non-natural births out there and the ones that I think a lot of people who have the harder births almost don't want to talk about them because there's almost like a
Yeah.
maybe a sense of failure. Because
Yeah.
I kind of experienced that right after having Calvary. I thought I had failed because of the narrative out there about, natural births and all these things. And
Mm-hmm.
I still have people telling me, oh, well, if you just would have waited, your body would have done what it needed to do. And
It doesn't sound like she ever would have come down if your hips
that was
or
the issue.
were like based on what you showed me with your hands. It doesn't sound like she would have been able to get into the birth canal. Like,
My best friend is a doula, a very well experienced doula that I had my whole pregnancy, and I very much trust, what she says because she very much pushes for the natural labor, and
yeah,
even she said, like, something's not happening, like there's just nothing going on here, and I
yeah,
was like, okay, like that sucks, but
yeah.
we're gonna move through. So yeah, I still have to deal with that. Like I still have to deal with my friends who had the natural deliveries and the pregnancies that they wanted and saying, "Oh, well, if you just would have waited, then it all would have just happened." And I'm like, maybe it would have, or maybe I would have been one of those women like my mom, 30 years ago, not having the medical intervention who either lost myself or lost my child. So I'm very thankful that I had the intervention that I did because I have experienced people who have lost children because of this and have walked that with them. And
Mm.
so it was hard, but still rewarding. I mean, we still have a beautiful baby. So,
Yeah, that's wonderful. Well, I will let you know when this is going to air. It probably will be in just a few weeks, maybe like 3 or 4 weeks. So, I'll let you know. And if you want to send along any pictures from,
I
your
did respond
pregnancy
to
or the
an email
birth.
today, but I don't know if it went to you, so I can send it.
Did you
I
email
can
it to me or did you text it to me?
email it.
Okay. I haven't checked my email today, so it could have come through easily.
Just
So
send me
I'll check it. Yeah. Well,
the
you
piece.
have a wonderful rest of your afternoon, evening. um, I'm going to get a couple things done and then go to bed because I did 5 births in the last 12
Yeah.
days. So I'm like
I bet you're tired because you're
very
a doula,
tired.
right?
Yeah. Yeah. So I was at one all night last night and got home at like 6 a.m. this morning. So, and that was my last one until August. And I'm on like a bit of a break, which will be needed and good.
We'll have fun with your kiddos. Well, your husband probably put him to bed. He'll probably come.
Yeah. I still hear a couple of them. The older ones are probably still awake, but I think the little ones are down
How
or at
many kids
least
do you
almost
have?
down.
How many
I
kids do you have?
I have 5 and we have number 6 on the way.
Oh, exciting.
Yeah.
Yeah, my husband and we want 6 or 7. So I'm not sitting here thinking, wow, you have a lot of kids. I'm like, oh, how'd you get there? So,
Yeah. Well, we got here one at a time. I'll tell you that.
oh,
We're
yeah.
closer to 40. So but we started when I was 24. So,
Oh,
yeah. So and that was never our goal or dream or thought. We always were kind of like, well, we'll have a couple kids and that's what we'll do. But then the Lord just was like, that's funny. You think you're only going to have a couple. And here we are on number 6.
it's
So,
crazy. Hey, 9. Yeah, my husband and we have twins running my family and his family. And I said, if we had twins, I would not be upset. That's one less C-section for me.
right.
And
One less
feel like
pregnancy.
I would feel like my C-sections were justified if I had twins. So
Yeah. Well, they sound justified regardless. So, but yeah, one less pregnancy too. That's,
yeah.
well, at least one of my kids is awake. I just heard them screaming outside. So fun. I'll
Well,
be
have fun with
checking on
that.
that. Okay. Well, you have a great
Good
rest
guys.
of your night.
You.
Bye. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode. You can reach me at Surrendered Birth Services on Instagram or email me at contact@surrenderedbirthservices.com. Be sure not to miss an episode by hitting the follow button. Also, we'd love for you to leave a written review of the show so that more people's births and lives can be changed by the love of Jesus and the empowerment of accurate birth education. If you really enjoyed this episode in particular, please take a screenshot of it and post it to your Instagram story, tagging Surrendered Birth Services. If you would like to be a guest on the Surrendered Birth Stories podcast, please click the link in the episode show notes to fill out your interest form. Also, if you're interested in taking my childbirth classes, birth consultations, or having me as your birth doula, please click on the link in the show notes to take you to my website for online and in-person options. Just as a reminder, this show is not giving medical advice, so please continue to see your personal care provider as needs arise. We hope you have a great week, and remember, learn all that you can, make the best plans, and then leave it in God's hands.
they tell you when you get diagnosed with EDS, especially if you're female, um, that they don't recommend you having pregnancies after 25, which, like, clearly I'm going to because I'm 24
Yeah,
right
that's
now.
such a short window.
It's a
Because
very
then, of
short.
course, everyone's like, well, I don't recommend you getting pregnant before you're like in your mid 20s and start a career and blah, blah, blah,
Exactly,
blah, blah.
exactly. But
You're
it's
like,
like
wow,
it
I have like a 1 year shot at doing this.
Mhm.